Hi, everyone. My name is Lucha Sotomayor. I am from Chile. It's great to be here with you today. I work for the UN, for the Special Representative for Violence Against Children. I work on violence against children, different forms of violence, but specifically I've specialized in violence online. I think I joined last year, I think. I remember when I was working for UNICEF, and I told you a bit about what UNICEF was doing at the time. What I am going to be doing today is I'm going to be addressing online violence, as you already know. I want to encourage you to think critically about why online violence is such a challenge for different audiences. We're going to go through a bit of the differences between online and offline. We are also going to talk about two specific forms of violence, grooming and bullying and cyberbullying. We're going to challenge ourselves on what to do in order to prevent it and to respond to it. And we're going to talk about what some of us are living today with the current situation that is happening in many different countries, where people are in their homes, locked down. I have been, and so have my children and my family. We haven't gone out of our house in 3 weeks. So, and that means, and why am I telling you this? Because children and young people and adolescents are spending more time online and therefore are probably more at risk of different forms of online violence today more than ever. And there's a challenge for us and for young people on how to help prevent it and how to help respond to it, given that the online world seems to be one of the main means of communicating with the world for many people today. Those who have, at least for those who are fortunate enough to have access to the internet, and all you guys do because you're online. So that's what we're going to be doing in this session. I'm going to be talking for about 15 minutes, I hope, not more than that. And then I want to have a dialogue and a conversation with you guys. First of all, I want to ask ourselves why the online problem is such a difficult issue to address for a different audience. And when I say audiences, I mean your parents, right? I don't know how old you are, the people that we have today online, but I'm imagining you're young and you're adolescents or youth, right? And probably your parents didn't necessarily know so much about online violence when you started to go online. And there's a very simple explanation for that, is that parents, and I'm going to talk to parent now, we replicate, when we raise our children, we replicate as well the way that we were raised. And your parents were not raised to be aware of the online world because they were not online. The web is only 30 years old. So when your parents were growing up, their parents warned them about the offline risks, right? You need to look both ways before crossing the street. We don't talk to strangers, things like that, right? But and they taught that to you probably, but because they were not taught how to protect themselves in the online world, because the online world didn't exist, they didn't necessarily know or understand how to help protect you. And why am I telling you that? Because you have been left alone, air quote, in the protection sphere of the online world. You were given access to the internet, but not necessarily warned about why sometimes you are going to be at risk in different forms of violence online, right? So that places a huge challenge for young people in protecting each other, in helping each other be safe, in supporting their friends when they are at risk, in being able to speak out, in taking care of themselves, and also in educating their parents on the online risks and in having these conversations with them. We always, and when I say we, the adult world, we always address parents on how important it is for them to address these things with their children. But it's also really critical for adolescents and for children and for young people to take these issues to their parents themselves. So first of all, I want to I'm going to tell you 3 words that maybe you thought about this and maybe you didn't, that mean different things in the online world and in the offline world. And that's and sometimes because of that difference in meaning, we find ourselves in risky situations. The first word is share. It's a very simple word, right? Share. And when we were all kids, me including, we were all growing up, probably they taught us that sharing was good, right? It's really good to share. It's good to share your cookies. It's good to share your toys. It's good to share your things with your friends physically. And it is great to share. But the concept of sharing as a good thing was tattooed in our brains, right? It's good to share, and it is good to share. But when we go online, sharing changes its meaning, right? It's suddenly not necessarily good to share. Sharing puts you at risk. It can be bad to share sometimes. Don't share your intimacy. Don't share pictures of yourself that show parts of your body that you don't want to show to the world. Don't share your address. Don't share your location. Don't share information on how to find you, etc. And the call to action when you go online is share. Share what you're thinking, share a picture, share a video, share with your friends. So children, when they go online, they find themselves in a gray territory, a gray area that they don't necessarily understand why they are at risk if they're doing what they were taught to do, right? The other word is friend. A friend offline is the same as a friend online. Unfortunately, my generation started going online when we were young people, and we were kind of taught that in a very forced manner, right? We didn't really understand that friend online may mean something different than offline. Your offline friends know you, right? They probably know how you're going to react. They know what you like, what you don't like. But when you go online and you go on social networks, you have friends, right? Now the term has shifted a bit on followers as well, but a friend online is not necessarily the same as a friend offline, and therefore we are more careful, right? And the third word is delete. When I delete something in the real world, offline world, I delete it, it stops existing, right? But online it doesn't. Why am I telling you these things? Is because sometimes as young people, as adolescents, as children, find themselves in risky situations, we need to have a critical mind on why we find ourselves in a risky situation, who's not teaching us what we need to know. And if we see that somebody is not teaching someone what they need to know, we take on that responsibility, right? I'm assuming that you guys, many of you guys, might work with children, might work with other adolescents, and you address how to protect each other and how to support each other, and having a critical vision on the online world is very important for you to support your peers and to help each other. Gustavo, can we put the slide up, please? I have just one slide for you guys. I'm not going to bore you with really theoretical content, but I think that when we're talking about online violence, it's important to understand what kind of risks are out there and how do we classify them. And this slide is very easy to understand that there are 3 different groups of risks online, and those 3 different groups are related. 1, to the content I'm exposed to, right? And this means basically sexual content, pornographic content, age inappropriate content, self-harm, hate speech, discrimination, the content that I'm exposed to when I go online, right? That's the first group of online risks. The second one is related to how I behave, right? So I do have a responsibility on how I behave online. Those are the risks associated to my behavior, to my conduct. How am I online towards other people, right? What kind of content do I create? Do I upload? Do I share? Is it violent? Is it racist? Is it discrimination? And that group of risk is very associated to bullying, to cyberbullying, right? But then the third group is, who am I in contact with, right? If I'm a child, am I in contact with an adult? Do I know the people that I am relating to? Those are the third groups of risks, and that's when grooming happens, which is basically when an adult has the confidence of a child in order to ask for inappropriate content, such as sexual images or videos, and they are abused online, basically. So it's very important for us to have this classification in our mind. So when we are facing different risks, or when our peers are facing different risks, we know what kind of risks they're facing and why. Is it because of the content they're accessing? Is it because of their conduct and how they behave online? And or is it because of who they are in contact with, right? Thank you, Gustavo. I don't need the slide anymore. I'm sure that we can share it with participants if people want to, but that's just my only theoretical part: content, conduct, and contact. Now, we need to understand why why the online world can be risky, right? So the online world is very beneficial. You can access information, you can express yourself, you can create communities, you can organize yourselves, you can communicate with others, when in times of social distancing, for example. But so it's very beneficial. If we talk about the rights of children, there are many rights that are fulfilled in the online world, like access to information, self-expression, and the fact that you can form communities. Yes. Now, I'm going to talk now a bit more deep dive on two different forms of violence: grooming and bullying and cyberbullying, and what are the things that we need to look out for, and how we can support each other. How young people can support young people in educating them, in sharing this information, and in helping to prevent violence. The first form of violence is grooming, which is, as I was saying, when an adult has a relationship with an underage person online. They gain their confidence, and then they can ask for sexually explicit material, such as pictures or videos. Now, we used to think that when an adult wanted to pretend to be a child, they would create a fake profile in a social network, maybe of a 13, 14, 15-year-old person, and they would pretend to be someone they're not, right? Now, yes, that keeps happening, but the important thing to look out for is that adults are not, or a person who has not very noble intentions with children might not necessarily have a fake profile of a person, but a fake profile of an organization, or a store, or a modeling agency, or a shoe store, or a fan group of a music band, right? So basically, it's important to know that fake accounts are not necessarily fake accounts of people, but also fake accounts of things that you may be attracted to, or young people attracted to. We used to talk about, when I was growing up, the risk was if you were in the playground, if you were in the park and a stranger approached you with a candy. And the way that I was brought up was with the warning, never accept candies from strangers, right? Today, we believe that candy is in social networks disguised as things that young people like in those same social networks, such as stores, modeling agencies, groups that are formed around specific things like music. So that's one thing that we need to look out for. We also need, I know that many people, 1 in 8 social network account is believed to be a fake one. And those are the kind of things important to know and to transmit to our peers, and to when we work with children, to transmit to the children that we work with. Always make sure that they know offline the person who they are connecting to online, right? And it's not just people, it's also organizations. In online games, that also happens sometimes with fake accounts, and those fake accounts can pretend to be a player and give out free skins or free weapons in Fortnite, things like that. That also means having a relationship with a person online who you don't necessarily know in the offline world. Basically, we need to know that those fake accounts are not necessarily going to come in the form of people, right? Also, there is a very important connection between online game and social networks. Sometimes it happens that, and why am I telling you this? Because I don't know, like personally know the participants here, but I'm assuming that you guys, as scouts, you work with other children, right? And you work with other adolescents. And my goal here is to encourage you guys to support each other and have peer-to-peer support around these different forms of violence. So there is a connection between online game and social networks, and how in the online game you create forums and you create like there are fan groups in social networks about the online games, and sometimes there's a connection between fake accounts, right? And young people being in touch and adolescents being in touch with people they don't know around these forums, around these Fortnite forums or other online games, things like that. That's also an important thing to look out for. Now, we're going to move on to bullying and cyberbullying. So we know that the offline bullying, it's probably associated to the online bullying as well, but online bullying changes. Offline bullying, it's when someone is constantly picking on someone else in a very simple language, repeatedly with a power structure. Now, how does that translate in the online world? Maybe it's not going to be one person picking on someone all the time, but maybe because of a picture, because of a video, because of some content shared about one person that is rapidly spread, then you have that same in time repeating effect that can cause a lot of harm to someone, right? So the fact that it's in time in the online world happens because it's between too many people and not necessarily between one person. When I work with very young children, I ask them, can you order food online? And they said yes, right? And do you receive the food at home and you eat it? Yes. Okay, great. And can you buy something online? Yes, you can. You can buy anything online, right? And do you receive it at home? Yes, you do. So there's an effect on the online world in the offline world, right? There's a direct effect. And why is that so important to transmit to children? It's because children have not necessarily been taught this, right? Because the online world seems to be a very lonely experience. It's just you in front of a screen. And it's really important for us to transmit to children that we are always in contact with other people online. The online means that people are connected. It's an information sharing system, right? So we are in contact with other people. So the first thing is there's an effect. Now, sometimes children are, or young people are encouraged to speak up when they see something online that would make them uncomfortable offline, right? And yes, it is correct that we should be encouraged to speak up, but we also need to understand two things. One is that not everyone has the personality to speak up, right, in front of a group of people. Second is that when you do speak up, you might be exposing yourself to be a victim of violence, of cyberbullying. So sometimes people are scared to speak up. I said two things, but it's actually three things. And the third is we need to always remember that there are people involved in a bullying or cyberbullying incident, right? And the three kinds of people involved: the victim, that person who is receiving bullying or cyberbullying, at the receiving end, the perpetrator or the child who is bullying another child, and then bystanders. And all these three people have a role here, right? So what probably most of you might be bystanders. The call to action is we want bystanders to become upstanders. But yes, we know that they might not always speak up. How do you show support? How do you help prevent or put a stop to an act of online violence? One is you can have a direct conversation with the victim, right? You can advise the victim, support them, send them a really funny video, tell them privately that that this is happening, that you can help them. Speaking up doesn't always mean speaking up with a cape of a superhero in front of a whole bunch of people. Sometimes it's speaking to that person or to the person who is being bullied, right? So when we say bystanders become upstanders, we know how challenging it is, but we also know that it's not just about speaking out in front of everyone, but it's about supporting someone. We also know that bystanders can actually stop an incident of bullying. It's like the large number of people are bystanders, and those are the ones who can actually help stop it. There's something that we call when we work in development, C4D, communication, conditions for development, which is basically, how do you change behavior? It's really challenging and hard to change behaviors, right? Because people behave in certain ways, and telling them to do the opposite, it has many influencing factors. There are experiments, for example, when you have 3 or 4 people and you ask them, let's say you have 2 different sticks. One is a very long stick and another one is a very short stick. And you ask them, which one is longest? And let's say 3 people say the shortest stick is the longest. The chances for the 4th person to say that it's the actual longest are very, very low. That person probably is going to do what the group is doing, and they're going to say the shortest. Now, if just one person does the right thing and says the right thing, the evidence has shown us that then the others are going to follow that example, are not going to be afraid to do something or to say which is the correct answer. The same happens in bullying and cyberbullying and violence online. One person can actually make the difference by sending a word of support to the person in the receiving end, or by saying someone to the person committing bullying, right? And when I say that each individual has a different role to play, it's really important to know that when a person is bullying another person, when a child is bullying another child, the child who is bullying probably is being a victim of some kind of violence at the same time. It could be physical violence, it could be psychological violence. That person is going through something. That child is going through something themselves, and probably that's one of the reasons why they're behaving like that. So if you are adolescents and young people working with children and you actually see these incidents happening, you can always support the bully and not stigmatize it, but understand that that person is going through something themselves. So you have different people involved in an incident of cyberbullying, and those people also can receive help and can receive support. And why am I saying this today? Because as I said at the beginning of my presentation, if you missed it, today in many different countries, we are being asked to have social distancing, right? So the online world seems to be one of the only ways to communicate with other people. So children are today spending more time online and probably are more at risk. And where do you guys come in this picture as supporters and being able to support that person and to support each other? We talk about peer-to-peer support. When we see our peers doing the right thing, probably we are going to do the right thing as well. If you see that children are on the receiving end, it's always good to talk to an adult. Also, this is specifically important when you have a suspicion that grooming may be happening. It's always important to talk to the responsible adults. There are 2 forms of violence that children today are being more exposed to with social distancing. One is domestic violence and one is violence online. Domestic violence means their parents or their caretakers being physically aggressive with them, because physical violence in some places is still thought to be effective as a means of disciplining children. We are against physical corporal punishment or physical punishment, but we also know that today children, as they're more at home and their parents are being challenged, or caretakers or caregivers are more challenged to do many simultaneous things at home, that they may lose their patience and not have too much patience with children. And they're living with the perpetrators of violence and not necessarily having access to support systems. And that's when peer-to-peer supports comes very handy. Especially I'm imagining, and this is something that I think it would be good outcome of this session, that afterwards Scouts are able to create communities and talk about these things. But how can we support each other online, using the online world for the forms of violence that children are being exposed to today? How can we create communities? How can we create trusting relationships between peers, so children who may be victims of violence can speak up and say something? Or if you suspect a child is being victim of violence, how can you reach out? So that's one of the ideas that I wanted to reinforce. You can create communities online, and you can relate and use the online world today to communicate and to support each other, looking to support your peers, support adolescents, support children who may who could be victims of violence offline, domestic violence, but also online. It's to open your eyes when you're online, open your eyes when you see content that may harm someone else. Never ever like negative content or share a negative content or share it something negative about someone else, but rather send words of support. Now, I want to close my presentation with something that I saw recently that I think is going to can contribute greatly in creating these communities and in encouraging peer-to-peer support online, which is good news, right? Probably those who are being who are having social distancing have been receiving a lot of online content, right? About COVID-19, about coronavirus, about many negative things that are happening. I realized that I've been 3 weeks in social distancing with my family. We haven't gone out of our house. And when I received this program about good news, I realized that I hadn't heard good news in about a month. And when we talk about, and why am I saying this? But when we talk about violence online, most of the consequences of violence online have to do with mental health, right? Because they mentally attack you, and they create anxiety, they create depression. And today we are being exposed to a lot of bad news, right? A lot of bad things are happening in the world. And I saw this program that it was just about good news, and it asked young people, why don't you share it asked people around the world to share their good news, good things that had happened to them in their day-to-day life. And the program was by John Krasinski. Of those of you who are Office fans, US show, he's one of the actors. He's very funny, and he created this show at home in his computer, like using Zoom or something, about good news. And he told good news about people. I realized how important it is for us to share good news, and I think it could be challenging for you guys to start asking scouts around the world to share their good news, so you guys can help promote positive aspects of mental health and help young people everywhere be well in their social distancing and be safe. I think what role do you guys have today when you are not able to spend time with your peers physically? Is how can you support each other online? How can you share good news and help young people feel good with hope that good things are going to happen? Secondly, how can you support each other when you think a person might be victim of online violence or physical violence? Always good to support that person, talk to an adult, not to share negative content about others. And how can you create communities using the positive things about the online world and stay connected to the ones you love, but also stay connected to your peers? Okay, I talked for a bit more than 20 minutes as I envisioned initially, but I would love to have a conversation with you guys, to hear your questions. I know that Gustavo is going to be moderating. I know that there are some comments that have been coming in. So I'm going to stop now. I don't know if people can access the mic, or if it's going to be written, but send your questions, share your comments, or share good news, or share experiences of how have you been helping in your own countries to support your peers when it comes to different forms of violence. Gustavo, I'm going to hand over to you. I don't know if there are any questions, or you want to encourage questions to come in.
We have some questions.
Okay.
Okay, the first question is, how is it possible to monitor our children activities online?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know if that person is a parent, or are you talking about, I'm assuming it's a parent. So parental controls are important. There are many different, there is a one very good, because we say parental controls are important, but we don't necessarily know always how to set them. There's a website that I like very much. It's called internetmatters.org. And it has really good guides on how to set parental controls, right? So one thing is parental controls, how to set the privacy policies of the websites or the apps or the sites that your children use, and how to block inappropriate content. Now, it's really important to have conversations with children. There are three large groups of parents when it comes to the online, to their children's online interactions. One are parents who prohibit online access, right? The other is parents who are very permissive with the online world, assuming that their children probably know more than they do about online interactions. And then what we like to call digital mentors of their children. Just as we, and the suggestion is to be a digital mentor. So it's really challenging, and I think parents are being challenged today more than ever to understand what their children are doing. And what it means to be a digital mentor is try and be the one to teach our children about the online world, and to have conversations that encourage critical thinking about the online world. I started my presentation, part of talking about how certain words are different online world, and like share, like delete, like friend. And sometimes as parents, we think that our children understand the online world, and they may understand how to use it, but they don't necessarily know the risks that are out there. So I do encourage building trusting relationship with children and talking about these things with children. I wrote a blog about this, and I can share the link with Gustavo, and I don't know if Gustavo, you have any way of sharing that with people, but that was specifically for parents on advice on how to have these conversations with children, because they tell us parents, talk to children about fake identities, for example. Now, the question is, how do you talk to a child about fake identities? It is not easy. How do you play a game explaining to them why people may pretend to be different online than they are offline? So it's good to have this conversation. We need to have these conversations with children. We need to build trusting relationships with them, because because the evidence has shown us that when children are victims of violence online, they generally turn to their peers because they feel that their parents may not necessarily understand the world that they interact in. So it's really good to have those trusting relationships around technology with children. Why? Because the moment that they are at risk or that they feel uncomfortable, they will turn to their parents if they have that conversation. So parental controls are really important, and there are really good guides on how to set privacy policies. I recommend internetmatters.org. I also recommend NSPCC. That's a site from the UK, the National Society for the Protection of Children. It also has very good guides for parents on how to set privacy policies, how to talk to their children about this. So parental controls, yes, but also you need to build that trust. And children, because if you have the conversation, children will understand why they're being set privacy policy, parental controls. I have that conversation with I'm a parent, and I have an 8-year-old and 10-year-old. They are starting to go online, and we have these conversations, and they know what inappropriate content is. And sometimes they ask me, Mom, do you think this is going to be inappropriate for my own age? It's important to know that children are beings who understand these things, and not just assume that we need to block this content, but we need to have that conversation. So both things go hand by hand, right? The parental controls and the blocking. As responsible adults, we need to distinguish the content that is appropriate and the content that is not, but also to encourage our children to think critically about the online world, to understand the online world, understand that it's something that they can control, right? Sometimes I think that and when I say we, I mean the world, we confuse people with the language that we use online. There's like this, we We talk about the cloud, for example. When I work with children, I ask them, can you show me where is the cloud outside, please? Which one is the cloud that we're talking about? And they all laugh, right? And they look for it. And I say, well, there is no cloud. The cloud is a magical word that we use to talk about millions, thousands of computers that store your information. And when children start to understand those things, they start to have a critical thinking about the online world. Or terms and conditions, for example. Does it make sense that you have minimum age required to go on social networks? Let's talk about Facebook. You need to be at least 13, right? Or Instagram. Now, okay, so let's say we respect that. Now, once a 13-year-old goes online, does it make sense that they read the same terms or don't read the same terms and conditions that adults? It doesn't make, to me, it doesn't make sense, right? We need to encourage children to think about those things. Why? Because it gives them a power over the online world. This is not a magical thing that they cannot control. It's not a cloud far, far, far away. They have power over their well-being online. They can master this world. It's not a magical thing that they cannot control. Let's tell kids about the history of the internet, how the internet was initially created. It was in the war. It was in the 1960s, right? It was initially a tool for transmitting secret information from one computer to another. Why? Because we needed a way to be able to send information secretly. It was a tool used for war to damage something, right? Then as it evolved 30 years ago, the hyperlink was invented and we could connect more than one site. When children understand that the online world hasn't been there forever, they become more empowered to domain it, to control it, and not to be controlled by it, which is the big difference, right? So, sorry, I've gone overboard with this question. But talking to parents is so challenging because there's so many different aspects that we could talk about with children and help them. So yes, it's important to control and to block certain content, but it's important to have these conversations before children go online. And when it's before children start going online? When they're 7, when they're 8, when they're 9, that's when they need to start critically thinking about the internet, and not once it's too late.
We have
we
some
move on to
more questions here.
Mm-hmm.
How can we pass test tips and lessons to our children?
Talking to children. I am thinking about 2 different groups of audience in this in this session. Probably we have young parents, and probably we have scouts that work with younger children. It's important. When I talk to young children about this, I first ask them about the internet. What do they know? Do they know, for example, that when they're online, they're connected to millions of people? Do they know that? Do they know how long the online world has been there for? So as scouts, I think it's really good that maybe you guys can have sessions around this. You can ask them about their experiences, understand what their concerns are, and empower them to feel very confident about asking questions, about asking about certain issues. And as parents, we can bring these issues to our children by being part of their online world, by teaching them how the online world works. For example, are we going to assume that children automatically know how to look for information in Google? Just look for what that word means, right? When somebody looks for something in Google, you have 2 or 3 responses at first that are probably ads, right? That are paid for. Do we teach that to children? Hey, so when we look for something, these that say ad probably are an advertisement and not necessarily the correct answer. If we teach them how the internet works, how does Google work? It's easier to have those conversations and ask them what their questions are. Ask them what the internet is. Ask them what is bullying, and ask them how is it different to the online and the offline. There's a good, for the parents here, there are some good icebreakers, right? How to take these issues to children in this organization called NSPCC, National Society for the Protection of Children in the UK. And there's some good guides and icebreakers on how to address these issues, because it's a lot of information. It is a lot of information, and parents are being challenged to do a lot today. So it's not easy, right? So we start by addressing just the issues that our children interact with. I think one of the first things the two first important things to teach children about the internet, one is the fact that the internet is not a lonely experience, that they are with other people all the time. And just like we teach our children how to protect themselves from people that they don't know offline, we need to teach them to protect themselves from people they don't know online. And the other thing that is important to teach children is privacy. And that offline we are private, right? If we want to get undressed, we probably get undressed in the bathroom with the door locked, or in our room, we close the door, right? Now, how can we create analogies about this in the online world? The online world doesn't have any doors, right? And if we have a conversation with children about privacy, then it's easier to talk about privacy online and what it means to be private online, not to share, not to overshare. How does the word varies its meaning? So it's all about having those conversations. Like it's unfortunately, there is no way to protect our children from the online world without us being part of that protection and part of that conversation. We only have 3 minutes left. I was being asked to be very strict with the time. So Gustavo, do you have more questions?
Yeah, we have a last question. From what age do you think it is prudent for boys to create a virtual life?
If by a virtual life you mean to have handles and usernames like in their own social networks, I think that it's very important to respect the ages, the minimum ages for social networks. If the minimum age is 13, then a child shouldn't have an account in social networks before the age of 13. It's difficult for us to think that they will not have a virtual interactions before the age of 13, right? Children start having interactions when they're 8, when they're 9. So I think that's, or 7, I think that's when we need to start having those conversations. Globally, the average age of a child to have their own phone is 10. Now, does my 10-year-old go outside by himself or by herself? Probably no, right? So it's important for them to start having a virtual life, interacting with their peers, understanding how to interact with others. But around 9, yes, 10, yes, they are going to start doing that. But it's important for them not to be alone, right? So if you as a parent think that your child needs you in the offline world to be protected, in the online world, they still need you as well. At the same time that you give them autonomy outside, you might start giving them autonomy inside, online. But if you don't let them go out to the street by themselves before the age of 12, 13, probably you're not going to let them be just completely alone online as well. They need help online just as much as they need help offline. I have a very good friend who's a psychiatrist. When she tells her patients' parents, she tells them, if you let your child have a social network account before the age that they're allowed to, it's like leaving them alone in an alley at 3 a.m. at night. It's just, we don't leave them alone outside, offline, so we don't leave them alone online. I have 30 seconds left. Gustavo? I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't think we have time for another question, right? We have 24 seconds. I mean, we're on the time.
Yes, we don't have more time.
But well, if there's any other way I can support Scouts, I'd be happy to. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't address all the questions. I really do recommend, especially to parents and adolescents working with younger children, to access internetmatters.org and NSPCC. I think are very good. That's my timing. Like I said, a timer, are very good sources of how to address these issues and what and how to educate myself. Unfortunately, parents and adults are being asked to self-learn these issues and were not warned when they were growing up about these risks because there weren't any.